was elected in 2011, re-elected last year. I'm also the liaison to our Farmland Preservation Board here in Cumberland County.
County Commissioner, first year.
Hi, it's me, Gary Edelberg, County Commissioner, in my 4th term, 13th year.
Larry Thomas, Chief Clerk. I'm Kirk Stenner, Director of Planning Commission, my 13th year.
I'm Dave Swartz. I'm the Director of the Penn State Extension Office here in Cumberland County, as well as in Dauphin and Perry.
Steph Williams with Cumberland County Planning Department and Farmland Preservation Administrator.
Gary Martin, Penn Township Chairman, Board of Supervisors, my 10th year, and I'm also on the Ag Preservation Board for the county.
Would you folks like to sit up here, might make it easier instead of, if you don't mind. If you don't mind, if you do mind. Karen and Jeff, if you want to introduce yourselves.
Jeff Swinehart, Deputy Director at Lancaster Farmland Trust, primarily to oversee all the program activities of the organization.
I'm Karen Martin. I'm the Executive Director at Lancaster Farmland Trust, where I've been for 12 and a half years. Just prior to that, I was a county commissioner in Chester County for 12 years. So I was probably left office when Gary was, when we were elected. I left office in 2004.
Thank you. I contacted Karen maybe a month or so ago after we had our meeting about the farmland preservation. Barry did some research. Said you might want to try contacting these folks. Well, we did. Here you are, and appreciate you taking the time to come up here. Cumberland County, you know, we, as most counties in the state, who have a farmland preservation program where we work with the state, get matching funding, et cetera, et cetera. We also have, in years past, including this year, been able to get some federal funding thanks to our staff here. That's helped out very well. What we're trying to do is, you know, things cost money. We take money out of our county general fund just about every year to help fund the program, get matching grants, so on and so forth. But we're always looking at ways to see, can we do it better, or are there any other revenue sources we can tap into? I know many townships in the eastern part of the state have their own land preservation programs. Cumberland County, as far as I know, we only have one township that has that. So we're looking, they're asking you to, if there's anything you could recommend, you could do for us that helps supplement our farmland preservation program. And Gary, Jim, if you have, or anybody have any other comments?
Well, I grew up in Lancaster County.
Okay.
I'm well aware of the rich food.
Whereabouts?
Off of the village of Pike, through Lancaster Township. And, but I'm well aware of the rich farm tradition and Lancaster County's successful farmland preservation effort. And, you know, coming here, when I first got elected, we had a little bit of a financial crunch and trying to make ends meet. And so we had unfortunately cut back some of our funding for farmland preservation, our general fund contribution. So I'm interested too in learning, you know, how some of our other counties operate. I think Lancaster County has preserved more farmland than any other county in the state, except Berks always likes to say that they have preserved more acreage under the state program. Right. Under the state program, where they count wrong. I also had the opportunity to work in the state senate as a staff member, and most recently worked for the late Senator Michael Baker of Berks County, who was the Democratic chairman of the Senate Agriculture Committee, and was very involved with the state farmland preservation board. So, but it's, you know, it's, you know, I think it's important. It's one of the only ways we have as a county to really control uncontrolled development because at the end of the day, zoning and planning decisions are made, you know, by our local municipal representatives, although we also get involved in recommendations with respect to how land is zoned. I mean, we are a magnet for the logistics industry here
Sure.
in Cumberland County. And, you know, if you have a chance to drive through the county on Interstate 81, you'll see all the warehouses that have gone up. And, you know, I think that certainly our warehouses are part of our economy, but by the same token, we don't want to lose any more of our primary cultural land. And we're trying to do what we can to preserve, you know, as much as we can. Right now, 17,500 acres have been preserved under the Farmland Preservation Program, and it's 25-year history, 26-year history. But we have a lot of prime soil in farmland that is not preserved. So we're trying to do what we can. We're trying to reach the right balance, and then we're also trying to see, you know, what are the ways that we can maybe improve our program. So appreciate you being here.
And just add a few things. I'm from this county. I've been here for 55 years, other than leaving from school for a while. So I'm firsthand witness to how much the development trend has changed us here. So I can't say that I'm surprised that there's so much interest, knowing where we came from over the last 5+ decades. But we are a developing county, we're a growing county. And I think that finding the balance between that reality and what we want to preserve is probably one of the biggest challenges that this county is going to go through ever. There's I think a couple of things that we need to work through as a board. We have expressed an interest in preserving critical soils, but beyond that, the board has not really ever functioned under a formalized plan that says how much are we going to preserve and which acres are we going to preserve, because we obviously, like everybody else, we're coming at this from limited resources, so we're very interested in finding out how other people make the best use of the resources they have. But I think it really goes further than that. I think it's establishing a clear vision for what it is we want to do, other than just more, quote unquote, more. Because obviously, as I said, there are limits. We have sort of a conflicting message among our program. You heard Commissioner Hertzer just mention about how we don't want to lose any more farms and that we've got too much development, and yet our policy is pursued supposedly not to be an anti-development strategy, if you call it that. And we also have essentially an emphasis on preserving acres that presumably not in the path of development. So I think we're kind of still a little confused as to what exactly we're trying to accomplish. So we need to talk to as many folks who've been down this path before as possible, get our thinking clear, because again, Commissioner Richards said we don't want to lose any more farmland. I think that's candidly not realistic. We are going to lose some. We're a growing county, but we need to pick out which of the areas that we need to invest, and that is we're investing large sums of public dollars. So we need to choose wisely. We need to figure out which ones are worthy of that investment and which ones might be less important, quite frankly. Not that they shouldn't be preserved or won't be preserved, but do we need to spend several $100,000 or more to preserve something that may not be in danger of being lost? Mm-hmm. So we need to get our heads straight about what it is we want to accomplish, and obviously have a long-term view too. One of the things Vince mentioned is that we only have one municipality that is hands-on involved in this type of preservation policy. So I think that alone says that something there is not a feeling that we're in any type of crisis mode, and I don't believe we're in a crisis mode. But we also don't want to be behind the curve. That's where too many places find themselves reacting, and they're having to undertake a crash effort at very high dollar value, and they lose a lot before they actually get spun up to where they need to There is a lot of support for a balanced approach among our public, and we just need to figure out the right way to make that happen.
If I may, just very briefly, there's one other layer to this. And go back to what Vince said. We were at this meeting talking about county's contribution to county contribution, and we talked about the fact that I had known people in upstate New York, private sector, charitable organizations, 501c3s, that were engaged in both open space and farmland preservation. And we started talking about what kind of private sector support there currently is and what kind of potential there might be for more. So that it is, for whatever the goal is, that it wouldn't necessarily be the public sector having to take on the whole burden. And in fact, a lot more could potentially be done with a vibrant private sector support as well. And so, as Vince mentioned, that sort of set me out on research, and everybody I talked to said, talk to them folks in Lancaster, they know what they're doing. And it is as impressive as the little bit I knew about you all was. After delving into it more, it's even more impressive, the extent of the support, the amount of the support, the breadth of the support that is being brought into this effort from the private sector through your efforts. So we have a lot to learn.
Folks, may I interrupt? In my first 10 months in office, I forgot to do something very important, and that's called a meeting order. So I'd like to call the Cumberland
So
County
all those
Commission.
comments were off the record.
We gotta start over now.
No, my traceable adjustment plan. Call on the meeting to order. Is there any public comment? Okay, hearing none. We'll proceed. Staff, do you have anything, Dave? Kurt? Gary? Stephanie?
No, I just encourage you to listen to that.
Okay. All right, well, Karen, please proceed.
Let me hand these to the commissioners first, and then we have copies for everybody. This is a little bit of information in there, a little bit of background. There's a map in there, and then some of this is kind of publications that we put out to the public and how we do education and outreach. When I introduce myself, I very rarely comment on the fact that I was a county commissioner. I refer to myself as a recovering politician. I too worked in the Senate. I also was and I only say this because there are elected officials in front of me. I was also the executive director of the Republican State Committee a long time ago. So the reason I say that is because I bring to this conversation, I think, the perspective from both sides, from the elected officials and the challenges that you face in your community, both from the growth perspective. I used to always say that every taxpayer has sort of two heads, one that says we want everything and the other says we don't want to pay for it. So the conversation today, we'll talk a little bit about hopefully how Lancaster County has been able to pursue with some diligence their goal of preserving the best soils in the county, and at the same time be true to your conservative roots of and take into consideration the challenges that the taxpayers are facing. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background, and just going to talk about programs that we do and how we do it. Lancaster Farmland Trust was founded almost 29 years ago. It was not too long after Lancaster County. Lancaster County, of course, was the first state to start preserving farmland. It did it before the state program, actually. It was putting easements on property on farms before the state program started. Senator Mel Weyer was the author of the Farmland Preservation Bill from Lancaster County. And so Lancaster County was very actively involved in farmland preservation. And about 5 years, well, less than 5 years after the county started the program with the state, they looked around, and the same people who had promoted the idea of the county getting involved with the state program started to look around and say, much of the land in Lancaster County is held by the Plains Neck farmers, by Amish farmers. And so they decided they would start a private organization with the primary purpose of enabling those Plains Neck farmers to preserve their land with an agency other than a government agency. And of course, 30 years later, if you look at the wisdom of those people, I don't think they knew how successful their efforts would be or the vision that they had, but Lancaster County now leads the nation and the state in the number of acres farmland preserved. Lancaster County was the first county 3 years ago to surpass 100,000 acres of farmland preserved. Jeff can go over all the numbers. It's about 25% of the land zoned for ag in the county. Of that number of acres, now it's about 106,000, 107,000 acres. It's about 1,400 farms, so 1,400 farm families that committed themselves to protecting their land. We hold the easement on about over 28,000 of those acres. The rest is by the county. The success is, I've talked to now three boards of commissioners in Lancaster County and members of the Ag Preserve Board, and I think we all agree that the success that Lancaster County has achieved is because there are two vibrant programs. One could have been successful by its own measure. So a private organization working alone in Lancaster County may have been able to be successful in the context of a private organization working alone. And the county would have been, by all measurements, successful also. But the level of success in Lancaster County was really achieved because there were two vibrant organizations working diligently to preserve Lancaster County's farmland and working together to preserve Lancaster County's farmland. And I really should stop here just for a second to say it's a complete partnership between the county program and our program. There's no competition. We do programs together, projects together. We hold joint easements. We're in regular contact with their staff. We have a contract with the county to do monitoring on some of their farms. So we are in constant contact with both the staff and the board of the Ag Preserve Board. They recognize there are things we can do that they can't do, and we know that there are obviously things that they can do that we can't do. And we found our places in that partnership. And in all of my time in government, I've never seen a partnership that worked as well as those two programs. So that obviously contributes to the success of the programs as well. We raise our money principally from private sources. We have for the last 10 years received a matching grant from the county commissioners. It's been as much as $1 million, and as I won't say as little, but it's been as small as $200,000, and everything in between, depending on what the resources are that they have available. It's a matching grant, which means we have to raise money we show them that we've raised the money to match the grant. It's a one-to-one match, so it's an incentive to our donors. But I guess 10 years ago, one of the county commissioners said to me, if you do this less expensively than we do, and you serve a constituency that complements ours, why wouldn't we give you money to preserve farmland? And saying to a nonprofit executive director, why don't we give you money? So we began a conversation that led to this great partnership that we have. We raise money by individual donations from foundations, from businesses in Lancaster County. We have preserved farms in 3 counties, obviously most of them in Lancaster County, but a couple in Dauphin and a couple in Chester County. We also work with individual farmers to help them improve their practices, and we work with municipalities to help them address stormwater and some of their Chesapeake Bay issues, because Chesapeake Bay is a big issue in Lancaster County right now. I'll let Jeff talk about the programs. We are run by a volunteer board. I think you probably are, I'm sure you're all familiar with how nonprofit organizations work. Ours does too. We have a volunteer board of at least 15 members, and they govern what we do. And we're a 501c3 organization, and we're accredited. We're an accredited land trust. We are the only land trust in Pennsylvania that does only farmland preservation, and we're one of the few in the country that does only farmland preservation. So the only way we do natural lands protection is if it's part of the farm. You know, if you have a stand of trees in the farm, we don't make you cut them down or cut them out of the easement. But we are principally dedicated to preserving working lands. And with that, I will turn it over to Jeff, and he'll talk a little bit about our programs.
Thanks, Karen. Thank you again for the invitation. I think, as you can see from Karen, we love to talk about the work that we do, and especially about Lancaster County. You know, Lancaster County is unique, and I want to touch back on sort of the growth aspect. The county has been very proactive from a planning standpoint for decades now of trying to balance the demands on growth in relationship to protecting viable, critical agricultural land, really for a variety of different reasons. Obviously, we know agriculture is huge in Lancaster County. That's what the county's known for. You know, the heritage is based on agriculture. And that has an impact on the local economy and to the quality of life that people expect in Lancaster County. And that is really, I would say, infiltrated amongst all sectors. There is some realization that Lancaster County is unique because of the agricultural resources that are there. Whether you are, a housing developer, or whether you own an industry, or whether you are in light manufacturing, there's some recognition that the aspect and the significance of agriculture provides value to those individual businesses, primarily by way of their employees and the quality of life that they get the benefit from in Lancaster County. So that's sort of a foundational aspect. But then it gets into, well, how do you know what to protect and what should be designated for growth? And years ago, the county went forward in establishing urban growth areas specifically set aside for growth. In partnership with municipalities, the municipalities across the county have all adopted those growth areas, although it was an initiative led by the county, really spearheaded by the county. All townships have adopted those and have made modifications on those over the years based on what they envisioned their long-range land use plans to be. From the preservation standpoint, we recognize that there needs to be a balance. We're not going to preserve every farm, we're not going to preserve every acre. But what are the best acres and best farms to preserve? And where can we make the quote sacrifice of, even today, some viable agricultural land that we know probably long-term a better use might be for a residential or commercial standpoint of trying to balance that. While we would prefer not to see any acres developed, the reality is going to happen. Lancaster County, the county's going through their comprehensive plan update. They have predicted, based on past growth trends, that over the next 20 years, the county's going to grow by 130,000 people. Half of those are going to be internal growth. And, I always come back to people, we have big projects happening in Lancaster County where it's, we're losing that farmland, we don't want to lose any more farmland. But to be able to say to those people, those residents, well, half the growth is internal, and are you willing to tell your kids you can't live here? And that's sort of the reality of it. So it's striking that balance, which is difficult to do. But we've taken a policy that we will not protect farms inside of those urban growth areas. We've been approached many times from landowners who want to protect their farms. If we are approached, we go to the municipality. There are some instances, depending upon the location of that farm, if the municipality knows it's going to permanently be preserved, it's sort of on the fringe of their growth area, they may be willing to remove it from the urban growth boundary and rezone it back to ag at some point. But that's a discussion that happens at the local level to get the input from the local community of what their long-term land use plans and strategies are. So I think that's an important piece of this discussion, and understanding the value that the agricultural lands provide, not only from the obvious agricultural economic impact, but also now starting to realize water quality issues that we have to address. And Cumberland County, if I'm correct, is in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. So you all know those pressures as well, and really looking at land uses and their impact to water quality And agricultural lands managed appropriately can be one of the best uses of lands in terms of water quality. So it's really talking more, not about preserving land for the sake of preserving land, which I think historically, even we talked about. It was just preserve land because you wanted to protect land. The conversation now really has changed into protection of land because there's a significant layer of benefits that achieve with the protection of that land. Yes, it's the agricultural value, it's the economic impact, but it also gets into, what are the full ecosystem services that that land provides and the benefits that are achieved from that. And resonating that message to attract more people, one, to our organization who are willing to write checks to a nonprofit, but also to provide support to the elected officials in terms of wanting to see additional resources go for the protection of farmland. So that's, a change in conversation that we are trying to have in Lancaster County, because we realize the old days of protecting land for the sake of protecting land are over, that message needs to change moving forward. And I think that's probably relative across much of Pennsylvania in terms of protection of land. Resources are scarce, and just doing it for the sake of doing it is not even an argument anymore.
It sort of
Absolutely.
asks a question or statement, and just for the record, I started my college career in Millersville
Oh, great.
a long time ago. And so I'm somewhat familiar with how much Lancaster has changed as well since the early or the late 70s, say it that way. The one question I have that maybe sets you folks apart to some degree, I don't know what degree, is the fact that you, as you mentioned, you're formed in part to deal with the unique dimensions of the plain people agriculture. But there's another dimension to that, which is the tourism and visitor dimension, which is huge. And yet I find it interesting that in my dealings with Lancaster, coming that far, nobody seems to really want to talk about that. And I did notice that you made a mention of it as well. Is there an appreciation for, or is there an over-appreciation or under-appreciation for that role? Because I can tell you, if I were a commissioner in Lancaster County, you'd have some responsibility as well, and you're very active as the visitors bureau down there, very professional. That I would definitely be looking to sink money in on that basis as well. Preservation of plain people, agriculture is a huge, huge tourism draw for Lancaster County. Now that's something that we do have a significant Mennonite population here, but it's not quite as well known. So, but in terms of the political, if I may say, political aspect of appealing for the preservation of that added economic benefit, how does that factor into what you do?
Well, it certainly does. I mean, I think, from our perspective, it's sort of inherent that that's a part of it. We recognize that, many people that visit Lancaster County visit because of the Amish community and want to experience that. If you talk to those within the tourist industry that are sort of directing where those emphasis are, they wouldn't necessarily say that. There's some belief that people come to Lancaster for the shopping malls and things of that nature. We all sort of know that they're coming to experience the agricultural heritage primarily from the Plainset community aspect. And I think in some regards, we probably take that a little for granted and probably could do more as a county to promote that, because it is a significant economic impact. And that trickle down effect of that is dramatic across the county. So,
The only thing I would add to that is, for the most part, people refer to the connection between agriculture and the Plainset people and tourism. But because Lancaster County's economy is so dependent on agriculture, that really drives the conversation more. It becomes, tourism becomes, and the preservation of farmland becomes sort of part of the economic argument of why this is important. So it's more a discussion of protecting farmland to protecting the economic viability of agriculture, because that's so critical. But we try and make the connection more. We try and make the connection. The tourist industry makes less of a connection, but we try and make more of a connection. as much as possible. There's no question they're connected.
Just to, so there, in your packets, there's this spreadsheet, which this is the cumulative totals in relationship to the challenge grant that Karen mentioned that the trust has been awarded now 10 years from the Lancaster County Commissioners. And you can see, I mean, the total dollars of investment from the county is significant, you know, over $7.5 million over those 10 years is pretty significant. You know, when you start looking at those numbers, and this is really sort of what got the elected officials then and past boards and current boards to continue to support this effort, is when you start looking at, you know, the ability to leverage and extend dollars over more acres to achieve the broad objective of farmland preservation. That's really where a private, nonprofit organization can bring benefit to the overall collective strategy. Because obviously there's a constituency out there. In our case, much of it is the Plainset community due to religious beliefs. But obviously there's another constituency out there that has a hesitation of working with government and would just prefer not to do that. And we work with a lot of landowners under that context as well. As well as having the ability to have some more flexibility in terms of our program than what the county state program has, which is, as Stephanie knows, is dictated by, for the most part, the state. As well as, you know, the flexibility in timing to meet demands of what landowners have. Because what we commonly see is the conversation of preserving the farm typically happens during transition from generations, parents to children, or change in operation, where they're looking at either changing their operation and making some sort of investment back in the operation. And typically that's where we see preservation as part of that discussion because of the resources that can be gathered from that transaction. So again, the timing aspect becomes critical. And just based on the nature of the program at the county state level, you know, it's hard to meet those time frames periodically.
Jeff, can I ask you a question? On this chart, over these years that you have listed here, what was the commissioner's contribution or the county's contribution to their farmland preservation program during those years?
It would have ranged more recently. So this past year in 2015, Lancaster committed 1.6 million, which was what they used as their match to the state as in comparison. And it's been around that level for probably the last 3 or 4 years, slowly sort of ticking down by a few $100,000 every year. If you get back into the early days, 2005, 2006, 2007, I would anticipate, you know, I have to go back and look, but I would imagine the county contributions at that point in time were probably closer in the 2.5 to closer to $3 million is what they were allocating for the state match.
Would you estimate that this $7.5 million might be, say, a third of what the total contribution of county resources to farmland preservation over these years?
I would say a third would be at the highest point.
Okay, a quarter to a third.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a similar question. I just wanted to follow up. And I guess it kind of goes to you said in part, the trust was created because of the Plainset population not wanting to be involved in government. Okay. But when I look at this, and I'm just wondering, and I guess I'll just ask the question. You get private contributions, but then you get a $7.5 million taxpayer contribution from the county.
Right. Yeah, and what we have found, so when we first pursued the proposal of the challenge grant, that was the primary concern that we heard from our board. You know, how's the Amish community going to respond to this? And we, for 20 years up at that point, always had this assumption that if the trust started accepting government funds, that the Amish would not work with us. And we were wrong for 20 years, obviously. And what we found out that it necessarily wasn't where the money was coming from, but it was who was the entity in which they were doing the work with. You know, who is the entity that's taking them through that transaction? Are those decisions being made in a public forum? who's holding that easement and enforcing that easement moving forward. And those became primarily the largest concerns that we identified working with the Amish community in initially going out to some of the leadership and farmers that we had worked with in the past to say, you know, there's this option of accepting some government funds. How do you think the community will respond? And that was the feedback that we heard. And to this day, and there's been 180 farms preserved under this program, upwards of probably 90% of those are owned by Amish families. We've only had one landowner ever tell us, I still only want to make sure I get private dollars. And he was the bishop of his church district.
Let me ask you something though. I mean, if I look at this, if you were to take the private donations plus the county contribution and, you know, put this into the state program, you would draw down even that much more.
Not true.
Not true?
Not
Okay.
true. And
Can you
you would
explain
leverage
that?
different dollars, and Jeff and I will both talk about it, but one of the reasons, and this is what the county commissioners came to the conclusion. We're able to leverage dollars that the county doesn't leverage when so you put the money up and you put it into the county program, and you obviously get the state drawdown. We provide value in two different ways. The first is that we leverage dollars that the county can leverage. So we have foundations, private individuals, and private businesses to leverage money. The numbers that you see here are only a fraction of what we raise in a year. So the county uses 200,000, we raise 200,000. Our total budget is somewhere between 2 and 3 million. So we're raising a lot of other dollars. Much of that is for land preservation. But the other part of it is we do this for a lot less. And there's we pay about 25%. So if you pay the appraised value for the easement, the appraised value of the easement to your landowner, we pay about 25% of the appraised value to our landowners. And so the first question that people ask is, why would somebody preserve their farm with you when they can get more by preserving with the county? Some of it is a situation that is somewhat unique in Lancaster County, although I think many counties have backlogs. But one of the reasons is the county has a very structured program as required. There's an application period, you put your application in, the farms are ranked, and the top however many farms in a year get preserved. Well, if you have a waiting list, and in Lancaster County there's a 200 farm waiting list, and there's a you have a timing issue, you want to get this farm preserved for whatever reason. You're transferring it, you're selling it, or you just want to get it done. And you don't make the cut the first year, and you're going to be re-ranked the second year if you stay in it, and maybe the third, fourth, and you may never get there, then we become an option other than the county. The second reason is if you, for whatever reason, don't want to work with the county, don't want to work with the government program, then clearly we're an option. And then the third reason is the difference between what we pay for that conservation easement and the appraised value is considered a charitable deduction by the IRS.
So that's what this means.
That's exactly right.
Landowner charitable.
That's right. So what doesn't happen in the county program is that there is a significant landowner contribution because we only pay about 25% of the appraised value. Now, in some cases, prior to 2 years ago, many of our farmers weren't able to take a contribution because they didn't have a high enough adjusted gross income. But 2 years ago, Congress changed the requirements on for charitable contributions for conservation easements to allow a working farm to take 100% of their adjusted gross income as a charitable donation and to take it over 15 years. So that becomes a little more attractive now for a landowner, especially if they're selling their property and they're going to have capital gains. And so now they've got, so we encourage landowners, and some landowners choose to donate the easement in its entirety to us, but we encourage them to look at the financial aspects of this, because it may very well be that depending on their particular situation, donating the easement or donating a significant portion of the easement actually works out better for them. It's not cash in hand, but it may work out better for them. And that's where you're leveraging value that the county program can. And Lancaster County Commissioner said, well, our goal, and remember the overall goal here always started out to be preserve as much of this good quality soil as we can get preserved in whatever way we can do it. And they looked at it and said, not only are the Lancaster Farmland Trust leverage dollars that we can go look for contributions, but they can provide an option to landowners that we can't as a county entity provide. And we also, one other thing, and Jeff mentioned this, we provide some flexibility, and we can provide some flexibility in our easement that the state program can't. So you got 2 kids and you want to subdivide a farm down the road, down the road someplace, we can put that into an easement. And the county state
Well,
program.
I was going to ask you whether or not the farms under this program are being preserved in perpetuity.
Yes, we're required by the IRS.
What you're saying is there are some, you have more flexibility with respect to if you're going to create an easement for a home for a child or something.
We do. So every easement under the county program, county state program, has a one-size-fits-all easement. Ours are tailored to the landowner. And that sometimes is attractive enough to make the landowner want to work with us.
I would say in many cases, that aspect is probably more attractive than the financial gain that they can get. Because, at least from our experience, a farm family that wants to preserve their land is because of a personal commitment to that land. And what follows that, or probably is in advance of that, is being able to provide for the family. And if it's, I have 2 kids, and I would really like to accommodate those kids on the farm, can I subdivide off 2 lots and 2 houses on this 75-acre farm? We have the flexibility to do that. Obviously, it impacts value that they may receive, either 1 in cash or 2, the charitable piece of it, because they're retaining that value. But that flexibility we see is really what motivates landowners. It's that goal of how do I provide for the family and what the family's needs are. Obviously, we do a lot of work together with plain sex communities, and a family might have 6 or 8 or 10 kids. And there's a recognition that, well, you're not going to provide a house for every child, but being able to provide 1 or 2 in addition, or a little bit more flexibility than what the county state program has, provides value to them.
Okay, I want to interrupt just for 1 second. We scheduled this meeting for an hour. Unfortunately, we probably should have made it longer. Would anyone here be opposed to staying till 2:45?
It's right on us.
Is that okay with everyone here?
Which time's our meeting?
3:30.
Oh, he drives fast anyhow.
Are you okay?
The only thing
Probably.
is, I see.
I might leave a few minutes early.
Yeah, the reason I would, Karen and Jeff, if you want to get through what it is you want to present to us today, then we can save our questions. But this is fascinating.
The only thing that I just want to quickly go through with what you have here. So this is a farm, and from what we've said and what I think this map demonstrates, the success of the program in Lancaster County is because there's 2 programs. It meets more constituents' needs. It preserves more farmland. If you look in the eastern part of Lancaster County, you'll see we have more red. In the western part, there's more green, where the ag reserve farms are. For many years, until just recently, there were a number of municipalities in the eastern part of the county. First of all, it's the biggest concentration of Amish, but they also didn't have ag security areas, so the county program couldn't preserve farms there. But we could, so we were an option to the coming together of both the ag security areas and the plains ag. But I think this map is the best way to sort of visually picture why the 2 programs work. Why the county has a successful program, because of the two organizations. And then just on the left-hand side, we do a highlights piece to tell you what we did every year, and then there's a newsletter and an annual report and a brochure that we have. On the right-hand side, behind the map, we did a poll in December. Everyone assumes that farmland preservation is popular in Lancaster County, but we wanted to be able to demonstrate mostly to the elected officials, that it continues to be an issue for people. So we did a poll, and the results were pretty remarkable. A couple of newspaper articles,
And then the last thing on the right-hand side is information that we provide for farmers about our Smart Farms program, which is where we work with farmers to reduce the environmental impact. One of the other differences that we're very proud of between our program and the county program, because there's much to do in the county program, the relationship is often ends with the landowner or is reduced significantly at the time after the farm is preserved. They don't have a whole lot of interaction except that maybe an annual monitoring visit. We like to say that our relationship actually starts with our landowners when the farm is preserved. So we continue our work with them. We help them with their implementation of practices. We look for financial resources for them and do outpatient education about best management practices.
It appears that you're essentially fulfilling the role of the conservation district.
We do. We work closely with the conservation district, but again, we're a non-government agency, so we do a lot of that.
Same thing caters mostly to the same audience, the same reasons. Okay.
And just getting back, we commonly get the question, well, how much farmland does Lancaster need to preserve? And head nodding your head.
Well, that's our question. Too.
And I would say that there hasn't been any determination on a number, and it's really based on, there's a recognition in Lancaster that there's an entire industry which relies on that agricultural land. All of the service providers, whether it's equipment dealers, feed dealers, the banking industry, the insurance industry, that's relying on that agricultural land, and how much land is necessary to support that broad industry. And that's sort of a question I don't think anybody can really answer. We sort of come at it from the perspective and go, well, if they start leaving, we probably haven't preserved enough land, and at that point, it's probably too late. So some of the strategy is, ensuring that the infrastructure that's necessary to support the farmers remains in Lancaster County. And I think we believe that 106,000 acres isn't enough. Is it all 400,000 acres of farmland in Lancaster County? Probably not, but it might be. And the other thing with Lancaster is so many surrounding counties rely on the agricultural infrastructure, those service providers within Lancaster. So it sort of has that ripple effect of, if they start leaving Lancaster, what does that do for other regions, neighboring regions, and impact their agricultural viability? So that's a question we always get asked, and that's the best answer we have at this point.
Well, I just want to go back, and I just want to say that, I made a statement earlier that I don't want to see us losing farmland, okay? I know that that's not realistic, okay? I understand that. And this is all about balance. But what I thought was interesting is, because I am from Lancaster County, and I remember, Lancaster County when I was growing up, okay? And let me tell you, there's a lot more development in Lancaster County today than there was when I was a kid. And so a lot of fantastic acreage has been lost. By the same token, this is a program that's worked is trying to protect the prime soils. This program in concert with the county's effort. And so I want to go back to the 106,000 acres that have been preserved. I believe you said that that's 25% of the farmland. Now, is that the 25% of prime farmland, or is that 25% of all farmland?
That would be, it's about 25% of all farmland. In Lancaster, when you start seeing class 4 soils on the map, our farmers involved in our class 4, that's bad soil. So prime is significant in Lancaster County. Areas of the county where you start seeing is in the river hills along the Susquehanna River, some of the southern.
So what percentage of prime soil would you say that has been preserved? And I'm assuming all 106,000 acres is pretty well.
I would probably say it represents maybe 30% of all prime soils in the county. I never really looked at it from that perspective.
Stephanie put together those numbers, charts for us. It's hard to pinpoint those prime soils, but the percentages that you're quoting, when you add in your 501c3s, it does come out to about 25%. What concerns me in Cumberland, we're under 11. And we have a ton of prime soil. It's just, that's what concerns me. You know, Berks County's at 30%, York, Chester, 15, 20 some. You know, the fact that we're only under 11 is a concern to me. I want you folks to finish what you need to present us and then.
No, you go ahead.
No,
Okay,
We'll
sure.
fill in when you ask questions,
All
so
right,
you go
the
ahead.
floor is open for questions.
So our county's comprehensive plan recommends preservation of these prime farmland areas through a range of tools, including the agricultural land preservation program. And one of the findings that we were presented with is that 80% of priority farmland as designated by the county comprehensive plan is not preserved and vulnerable to conversion to non-agricultural uses. So if you take, if you look in comparison in terms of what our contribution has been to farmland preservation, especially in recent years, it's significantly below, the contribution that's been made in Lancaster County, for example. But I guess, and again, I wanted to go back to the question about the county's level of support. $1.6 million is generally what they contribute to the farmland preservation program, and then it's something less than that to the farmland trust.
Yeah, this year, 2016, it's 250,000.
Okay.
And it's really dependent on your budget.
Do you know, okay, and that raises the question, do they, essentially allocate this on an annual basis from the general fund, or do they float bond issues to support the farmland preservation program, or how does it work in Lancaster County in terms of the funding?
More recently, the strategy has been trying to fund it just out of the general fund. Historically, it's been funded primarily through bonds, but it has been a shift.
They've been trying to fund it more from the general fund, but they do both. We have done both. The allocation for us is from the general fund.
Okay.
The allocation for the county.
You're referring to county, so the bonds, not the state.
When you start looking at numbers between two counties of different sizes, you gotta ask the question, percentage of budget. So in terms of the money that Lancaster puts into, and I'm just finally learning after all these years how to pronounce the
Lancaster.
Doing my best.
I'm good now.
You always tell an outsider.
That's right. Okay. And you feel the same way down in West Virginia, I guarantee you. So my question is, in terms of percentage of their budget, my assumption is a much bigger county, a much bigger budget than we do. So to compare absolute amounts is a little bit dangerous for us unless we think that we could afford the same thing.
Yeah, I don't remember what Lancaster's budget is. I want to say, what's the Cumberland County overall budget?
For general fund
Yeah.
only, I want to say it's between 75 and 80 million. And
I was going to say,
what
I
we donate.
think Lancaster County is like 200 million,
Okay.
maybe 220.
Okay. Because we're our donation out of the general fund is usually a percentage of a percent, like a third of a percent. It's a ridiculously.
Yeah, the one number I do know, which is kind of interesting about the Lancaster County program, is it's $11 a household for farmland preservation.
$11 a house. Well, I think we're talking pennies here for.
Yeah. And as you can see from the poll, people think 60% of people think are willing to spend up to $50 more.
It's the same, pretty much the same in Cumberland County. Even in townships that don't even have farms.
Right. And we found across all, we looked at crosstabs on the poll. It didn't matter whether they were from urban areas or suburban areas or rural areas, they all felt really strongly about the preservation of farmland. One thing I would say about the different sizes in the counties, having experience from as a county commissioner in Chester County, which was the fastest growing county in Pennsylvania, and has been for quite a while. I think Pike and Monroe or one of those is, you know, because they, by percentage.
Percentage,
Yeah, by
whatever.
percentage.
Yes.
I've answered all those questions.
God bless Chester County, okay?
Just like Berks County, you know?
And as somebody who came into office right after, in 1989, Chester County put a question on the ballot authorizing the expenditure of $50 million for open space. And not a cent had been spent when I walked into the commissioner's office, so it was literally a gift to be able to put that program together. But the issue in Chester County, and I know Vince has some experience in Chester County, but the issue with Chester County was it started too late. It wasn't necessarily there was $50 million in wells and there's a lot of money. In Chester County, at the time when that happened, it wasn't a lot of money. I mean, it's always a lot of money. But land values were so exorbitant and growing so rapidly that you couldn't provide enough incentive to landowners to stay on the land, and you couldn't keep agriculture viable when, you know, land was selling for $30,000, $40,000 an acre, you know, where every corner wanted a Wawa and a CVS and a Walmart and everything else, and were willing to pay whatever they had to. I always say, once Toll Brothers came to Chester County, it was all over, because they would fight every municipality on every issue. And then in Lancaster County, they got started earlier, and they established a program when the land values were lower, and they got it ingrained. And so it's not so much the size of the budget, or it's about making a commitment to the land, and the fact that you don't have a lot of land reserve, and that the values are still relatively affordable, makes it an opportunity to get land protected before you see too much more growth. And so I wouldn't look at it as we haven't done enough or we don't have the resources. I look at it as an opportunity given as time goes on, you know, that window of opportunity will close because land values will increase, farmers will sell, next farmer will sell because the farmer next to him sold, and you'll have what happened in Chester County. Maybe not to that size and scope, but that's what basically what happens when the land values go up. So you still have a lot of opportunity and a lot of land reserve, so it's really, you should look at it as an
At
opportunity.
what point in that cycle did the municipalities start to get involved?
Late.
Because right now,
Yeah, late.
There's, I think, the number here, I think 18 townships in Chester County.
I believe you're right.
Cumberland County would be great to do that now. We have one. And that's something. But I see you guys as really being a partner with us, with our program. As Gary said, we do have some plain set folks,
We do.
not anywhere near as much as Lancaster County. But even at that, the fact that there might be farmers out there who, quote, don't want to deal with the county for whatever reason.
Yeah, I mean, I think the
Yeah,
important
there are
thing on that would be to try to, identify where those farms are located and whether they're in, prime soil areas.
Yeah, and, I see you guys could probably partner with us for some of this. I really do. I think there might be a group out there that would rather go with a nonprofit. We have tried to push donated easements for 50%. Doesn't seem to be flying anywhere. We're talking about how well known it is, but it seems like you folks are giving people to pay 25 cents on the dollar.
Yeah.
And we cap our easements at 4,000 an acre.
So it's Lancaster County.
Yeah. When I first got involved with the county, I was on the ag board, and that was like 8-9 years ago. We were thinking 4,000 might be a little low, because at that time the building boom was, and it filtered out. So I don't know if we're priced right or not. I think we are.
The maximum we'll pay per acre is $1,500, and our average is about $1,000. So it's about
The max that your 501c3 would pay is 1,500 an acre.
by policy of our board.
Oh, okay.
One of the things, and I, actually I'd like that maybe Stephanie or Kurt might want to chime in here, but one of the things things I'm interested in is your success with respect to charitable contributions and then the tax benefits that flow back to either the landowner or if somebody wants to contribute, a business, for example, wants to contribute. We did a number of years ago, I think Vince made reference that we had a few folks who came forward with some donations just for our farmland preservation program, which enabled us to actually, then draw down additional state funds too. So more, and that's one of the areas where I think, if we could explore, and again, I'll ask for Stephanie and Kirk's thoughts on this. And again, if there's a way we can work in partnership with your organization, I'd be happy to do that. But maybe there's a way we can further facilitate charitable contributions toward our farmland preservation.
Well, I had a question for you, Karen, about those contributions and the people that give to the organization. You mentioned here today that your priority is preserving prime agricultural soils. But it seems that among the pool of people who want to provide contributions to an organization like yours is a group of people who are potentially motivated by just preserving open space, not necessarily prime soils. How do you have conversations with your donor base that you don't turn off donations, but that you maintain the focus on prime agriculture? So I'm interested in how you do that.
It's a good question because we always say, and the reason I brought up the fact that we're the only land trust in the state that preserves just farmland is because we really have a foot in sort of two different areas. One is agriculture, because that's what our mission is. But second, the environmental side. And most land trusts are protecting natural lands and stream corridors and trails, and we're protecting working lands. And there's a, as you obviously know, there's a big difference between preserving open space and preserving farmland. The enabling legislation that allows us to do what we do is essentially an open space easement under which farmland preservation is a subcategory. And so that does require us to consider other things other than just the agricultural value. So scenic views, conservation value, some of the things that you think of when you think of natural lands protection. As far as the county is concerned, that is an additional bonus because they won't protect, if a farm is half wooded and half tillable, even if it's prime soils, it'll be ranked very low on the county scale.
Right, that's not part of their criteria.
It's not part of their criteria, but it is part of our criteria.
Okay.
So that's even another way that we sort of balance out that program and make the program broader in terms of, but for our board and for our staff, we're an ag organization. And one of the reasons we got involved in these stewardship issues and helping farmers comply with Chesapeake Bay regulations is because we saw the regulatory side coming down on our farmers, and we wanted to protect our farmers. So we have stepped in and said, okay, we'll provide assistance to our farmers to help them out.
Well, I think your point about donors and how do you motivate donors who may have a more open space or environmental focus. It's really, and that's where our responsibility is to inform those donors that the value that agricultural lands can play in terms of a broader environmental perspective. Mm-hmm. And that's where, as Karen referenced, our Smart Farms program, for us to be able to go out to donors and to say, yeah, there's some bad apples out there in terms of agriculture, but here's what we're trying to do to work with farmers. We're trying to access grant dollars to provide them with the resources to make improvements, because the reality of it is, in the economics of agriculture these days, it's really hard for, especially dairy farmers, if they need to put in more storage unit or do barnyard improvements that are $150,000, where's the money coming from to do that? So that we can sort of pull people in based on that as well.
Yeah.
So you actually help applicants who are under your program with BMPs? and
We do.
Yeah.
We do.
We apply for grants and basically pass it through to contractors to do BMP implementation on farms.
Jeff or Karen, if I may, and this may have no relation, but Commissioner Eichelberger provided us some information recently out of the Central Penn Business Journal. Lancaster County, you're leading the state to preserve farm acres, but you also have a heck of a lot of manufacturing jobs in the county.
Yeah.
Is there a correlation or?
To some extent, the head of the Lancaster County Business and Industry Council, we always go back and forth about whether, and not us, but the ag industry goes back and forth about whether manufacturing, some of that manufacturing is related to the ag industry, so where you count it. So, Kellogg, and we go through some of the New Holland ag, for instance, is manufacturing, or is it really ag because it's ag equipment. So they're not directly related, but there's certainly crossover.
Okay, we'd love to have more, not only more preserved farm acres in Cumberland, but more manufacturing.
Well, one of the things, and this gets back to your question too, one of the, we see a lot of support from ag businesses because they recognize that the more land you protect, the better it is for their businesses. It's nice to have that business close to home, even if they're international, like New Holland Ag. It's nice to have that local connection to agriculture. So you look at Langer Feeds or Turkey Hill Dairy, or these are ag Kellogg. These are ag-related businesses that are glad to see that Lancaster County is spending some money protecting what is essentially the foundation for their business.
Quick question. If we were doing a case study, you folks are incredibly successful. Let's say someone else wanted to see if they could replicate that kind of success in terms of generating funding and support from the private sector for this. How critical a factor is the size and the dynamics of the Plains Sector community to your success? Could someone be as successful as you all without a similar element, or could your success be replicated without that sort of element? Again, a sizable population with their particular dynamics.
I mean, yes, I think it's possible. Does the significance of the Plains Sector community in Lancaster County help us substantially? It does. But can it still be replicated absent that? Which I think it can be. And I think it's really on the basis of the community's motivation of protecting what they value and cherish. And I think that's the driver. You take the Amish out of Lancaster, I think Lancaster Countyans will still want to protect those agricultural resources because it's home to them. It's, in many cases, even as we interact with, developers, especially developers in Lancaster County, they have a history with agriculture. Parents or grandparents had a farm. So there's that connection there. And I think that's what's really the critical piece, is the community's commitment to it.
I think that I would add to what Jen said, and this I'm sure doesn't come as a surprise, but it's hard for small organizations to stay viable in these days, whether it's a small business or a small nonprofit. And so it would be a smaller effort, and the extent to which it could be viable based on whether it could raise funds and that kind of thing would be a whole different ballgame. And what we have seen in the land trust world is consolidation of organizations, and the bigger organizations getting bigger. And Natural Lands Trust, which I know has done something in Silver Spring Township, and there you see in Western Pennsylvania Conservancy takes up now the whole western part of Pennsylvania is their territory. And it's, when we've had, our board has looked at it and said, does it make sense for us to do farms in Chester County and Dauphin County, for instance, when they came to us? That made some sense because it didn't make, they didn't have options they weren't comfortable with. And part of our strategic plan is to grow because even at our size, it's still hard to run an organization, just like running a small business.
get gobbled up by big organizations.
How about farms in Cumberland County?
I don't know the answer to that. That would be a board decision. But I mean, we and I said to Vince, you know, it is you certainly would have to think about how that would work. And I think it starts with your decision that this isn't a priority for the county, and you think that a private organization can help you achieve that goal. And so that's number one. And then, you know, we obviously, from our perspective, need to think about what that would look like and how it would work. And if you're interested in having that kind of conversation, we are certainly interested in having that kind of conversation with you. Do I know where it will end up? I don't, and I can't promise. But we're certainly willing to have that kind of conversation.
I can tell you that, you know, dealing with plain sect all the time in Cumberland and Perry and Juniata County, that if we had a Cumberland County Ag Trust or we had an arm of the Lancaster County Farmland Trust, we'd have a much greater participation with the arm of the Lancaster County Farmland Trust, because they still all go back there to buy things at certain district. You know, it's home to them, their parents live there. They're still tied really tightly to Lancaster County, and you will get an open door if you walk in with a business card that has Lancaster compared to the Cumberland Farmland Trust. I guarantee you that.
That's my question.
That's good to
If you
do.
want to have an auction, you still got to advertise in the, what is it, Lancaster?
Nice.
So, of course, it's still.
One of our big supporters, by the way,
Yeah.
for obvious reasons.
All right, folks, we got to wrap up. I know we have to go across the river to another meeting.
We appreciate your time.
I would certainly like to continue discussion if the board is willing to do that. But I do think we might be able to find something here to work together on.
Well,
And I know we don't know that for sure, but I think it's worth exploring a little bit more.
Thanks for taking the time to visit with us.
Yeah.
Absolutely
we'd like to
appreciate
talk
it.
about what we did. As Jeff said, pretty proud of it.
Let me make sure I do this right. Is there any other business? In front of the board, otherwise I'll entertain a motion for adjournment. We're adjourned.